Hello, Olketa. Mo welcome long and special interview long VBTC. Yumi glad Thomas Blongat with the Yumi Longa studio. Hemi Foreign Minister Blonga New Zealand, Honorable Nanaia Mahuta, where hemi savesta with the Yumi Long studio today. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much for taking this time to come to VBTC. Welcome to VBTC. And yes, it's been a busy schedule for you here in Vanuatu. If you could talk a little bit about your visit here, what are your reflections?
Well, the primary purpose of the visit is to rekindle and reinforce the warm relationship between Vanuatu and New Zealand. COVID has changed a lot of things, so the opportunity to come up here in person, meet with Minister Napat and other members of Cabinet and the opposition allow us as a country to continue to extend our relationship. And we did that by signing a statement of partnership called the Māori Partnership.
So in most of your speeches, you spoke a lot about Indigenous knowledge and why is it important to you to incorporate Indigenous culture and knowledge into foreign policy here in the Pacific?
It's important because it provides another layer and let's consider it another bridge to create and reinforce deeper relationships across the globe, but also those ancient connections that exist within the Pacific. So I think I bring that type of perspective to the role of foreign affairs, and I certainly want to see it grow.
You visited one of the communities here in Port Vila, seaside Port Vila. Could you describe how was the visit?
The visit was humbling. I visited the Fortuna community and the things that I heard was the strong connection back to Fortuna Island, what happened after the cyclone in terms of rallying around and ensuring that some relief got back to the island. Also how proud they are of their connections and their connections to the broader Pacific. And they've come here to establish their livelihoods, hard-working people. But I think the thing that impresses upon me the most is how they keep their culture alive during these challenging times when climate change is affecting many of us around the Pacific and especially our vulnerable communities.
If you could talk a little bit about the support the New Zealand government is giving to Vanuatu currently with the current disaster.
Well, we've sent four Air New Zealand Defence Force aircraft up into Vanuatu with relief aid, very practical supports to be able to assist. We were mindful right at the beginning that we could offer some technical support in order to understand what is required, and over time each flight that has come up has brought different types of assistance. So humanitarian support, technical support, and we continue to try and understand where the recovery effort will lead to and in what ways we might be able to assist.
We do know that not long ago, recently, we had the Cyclone Gabrielle that caused major flood damages in New Zealand. Climate change has now become a stronger message for New Zealand also. So what is New Zealand's support to Vanuatu's campaign for climate change?
New Zealand was a member of the original core group who supported Vanuatu's leadership to have a resolution considered at the UN for the ICJ to make a ruling on states' obligations at international law on the impacts of climate change. So we were really pleased to be able to lend our support, but also help shape the resolution in a way that where there would be greater support from across the global community. I want to acknowledge the leadership of Vanuatu and also the fact that they got even more support on the floor when the resolution was being debated at the UN.
And what support was provided to Ni Vanuatu workers and also Pacific workers who were affected by the Cyclone Gabrielle?
Well, first I have to acknowledge the huge contribution that RSE workers make to the New Zealand economy, but especially in certain sectors like horticulture. We did have some RSE workers that were impacted by Cyclone Gabriel, and one of the things that we also had were a whole lot of RSE workers helping with our immediate response and recovery effort. So we are very mindful that they have supported us in our time of need. On RSE workers generally, I think the reciprocal benefit back to their families and communities have been made an impact. In one of my visits today, I heard feedback from an RSE worker who was able to help support water supply, healthy water supply to his little village. And I'm sure that's the case in terms of the impact that RSE workers are having within their families and communities as they send their remittances back, as they return with different experiences. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Does New Zealand have new plans to improve RSE program in the Pacific?
Well, right now the challenge is to ensure that there is a win-win set of arrangements across the Pacific. Each Pacific country are facing different challenges with regards to their own domestic labour market, especially as tourism and hospitality services are required. And we're mindful as a country that we need to ensure that as we set and increase numbers for RSE workers coming to New Zealand, we do that understanding that we have to be sensitive to the domestic needs of Pacific countries. And that's why right about now we're consulting on the immigration settings and our RSE program.
Thank you, Minister. So, Vanuatu government has discussed with the Australian government about visa-free access. Is New Zealand thinking or considering a Pacific engagement visa like Australia?
That was a matter of conversation in my bilaterals. However, right now it's not a matter that our Cabinet is considering. And in fact, when it comes to RSE workers, for example, as I said previously, we're quite mindful that each Pacific country has its own domestic challenges in terms of being able to send workers over and meet their own domestic labour market needs. So I think it's an area of conversation, but it's not an area of priority right now.
What can your government do more to make RSE more effective here, especially in Vanuatu, especially in skills transfer, and also help that will also help New Zealand get more out of the scheme, but also same time sustainable for Vanuatu communities?
Well, I think in order for the RSE arrangement to be beneficial, it has to be mindful of a two-way transfer of experience, obviously labour market contribution, economic benefits, and then there are a whole lot of other experiences that, in my mind, may be really useful for RSE workers in New Zealand. We put quite a bit of emphasis on the employers who are hosting RSE workers to have regard to the care, pastoral care of RSE workers. We also put some expectation on employers in New Zealand that they will, within their employment settings, create opportunities by being a little bit innovative. Some understand that there is the potential for upskilling within their work environment, and some are probably learning from other employers who are a bit further down the track. I think the point of it all, though, is we need to ensure that there is a two-way reciprocal benefit through the RSE scheme.
Thank you, Minister. So, with the recent visit of US delegate to Vanuatu and other Pacific countries, what are your thoughts on US and China in the Pacific?
Well, the Pacific is increasingly becoming a contested region with superpower interest in the region. New Zealand's message is very simple, that the resilience of the Pacific is absolutely a key focus, because climate change is the most important issue for Pacific nations. We believe that strengthening regional institutions like the Pacific Island Forum, the Foreign Fisheries Agency, USP, are all areas where we can continue to build and strengthen existing architecture. And then there are arrangements in the security space that we can continue to reinforce rather than set up separate types of arrangements. I think it's true to say all Pacific nations are trying to understand what is happening in our region and trying to assert what is best for our region. And that type of focus and leadership will be very important because everyone wants a peaceful, stable and prosperous region. We don't want the militarisation of the Pacific. We don't want the situation where there are going to be increasing pressures from outside of our region for other interests rather than our own. So I think that's the area where many Pacific leaders are focusing their attention.
And what impacts does New Zealand see in the increased competition between US and China in the Pacific, and how can Pacific better promote their interest in this area?
Well, if I go back to my previous comments and regional leadership in this area, in July last year we had the Pacific Island Forum Leaders Conference, and the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific statement was agreed to by our leaders. And in that statement it had a number of key areas where Pacific countries identified we could work together on in the interests of the Pacific. Obviously climate change is a significant area of focus, but also leaning towards each other in establishing our priorities for our region. And I think that part of the solution is meeting the aspirations of that strategy.
There's a growing list of Pacific leaders objecting on the $250 billion nuclear submarine deal between Australia, United Kingdom and the United States. What is New Zealand's thoughts about the nuclear submarine policy?
Well, New Zealand acknowledges those arrangements. We're not a part of them. We have sought assurances from Australia with regards to the Treaty of Rarotonga. We do believe that the Pacific needs to remain nuclear free, and Australia has given us assurances that those arrangements do abide by the Treaty of Rarotonga. I think there's a broader conversation that we need to have over time, and that is our aspirations to maintain peace in our region. And for that to be a clear statement of intent, the agreement of Pacific leaders through the Pacific Island Forum and regional forums such as that will be very important in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your time and for speaking with us. Lastly, will New Zealand cut down on carbon emissions and join Vanuatu to stop any new the non-proliferation treaty of fossil fuel?
Well, New Zealand's mindful that actions must follow words. That's why we have made clear commitments not only to do our part domestically and transition towards a decarbonised economy, which will take us some time, but we're also doing our bit to contribute to the Pacific with our climate finance commitment of $1.3 billion, of which 50% will come into the Pacific at least and 50% will go to adaptation. But I'll make this point. When we look at certain sectors across our society, it will be challenging to transition. For New Zealand, in the area of transport, we identify that that is an area that will take us a bit of time, but we're up for the challenge. And as I say, Vanuatu's leadership over these next few months will certainly elevate the obligation on states once the determination is finally ruled that we need to do more. And I think our reality is that transitioning according to the profile of our domestic challenges will take time, but we can put urgency on it. And for as long as I'm in my role, I think that's the responsible thing to do for future generations.
Thank you again, Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, for your time in VBTC and for speaking with us. Thank you.
Thank you.